All right. Welcome to our 2021 Annual Responsive Grant Community Information Meeting for Animal Services. We did not have an open grant process last year for animal services because of COVID and our decision to make grants in a designated fashion because like every other nonprofit in the world, animal services nonprofits profits were hurting because of the canceling their big fundraising events and those kinds of things. But we're back on track this year, and we'll have new things to tell you about for those who haven't been here before. During the presentation, if you have a question, please put it in the chat. If you raise your hand or use that little tool to raise a hand, I may or may not see it because I'm going to turn on a presentation slide in just a minute. Does anybody have any questions before we get started? All right. Now, let's see here. We're going to go into share mode. So I'm going to give you some information, kind of general information about the Area Foundation and our grant process. Excuse me. And then we'll get into the good stuff related to the grant application. We're going to talk about the process that the Area Foundation has been through in the last few years. And then we'll talk about this year's process and what that's going to look like in the future. And plenty of times for questions as we go. This is the Community Engagement and Impact Team at the San Antonio Area Foundation. Our VP is Patricia Mejia, and we have 4 program officers. Stephanie LaFrosia, who is the program officer for Cultural Vibrancy. Jen Cook, who is the program officer for Livable and Resilient Communities. Cadence Corbin, who is a program officer for Successful Aging. And I am the program officer for Youth Success and Animal Services. Ilkia Cavalcanti is our Director of Research, and Catherine Garcia is our Grants Administrator. Many of you will have worked with her or will work with her. And Jane Pacchioni is our Managing Director of SALSA program. So that's our team. Over the last 4 years, we've been going through a strategic planning process, and we use a group of consultants called Foundation Study Group, or FSG. And we use a lot of people in the community, including donors, nonprofit leaders, board members, and nonprofit managers. So it was a pretty big group of over 60 people in and out over the time. And the big, I guess, culmination of it is we looked at the way we were doing our grants. We decided we wanted to do things that are going to be more responsive to the community, and also change our grant process a bit so that we'll be more accessible to nonprofits. And that's what I'm going to tell you about next. Our North Star, we call it, is that San Antonio area residents are deeply connected, have equitable opportunities to thrive, and contribute to the vitality of the community. The big word is right in the middle of that long sentence, and that's equitable. So what is equity? What do we mean by it? And I'm trying to move the pictures around so I can see it. We define it as the lack of disparity in life outcomes caused by associations with race, gender, ethnicity, age, and so forth, and also income levels. And improving equity means that we're promoting justice and fairness with our procedures, processes, and distribution of resources. And I guess the big definition for us is that equity means that who you are and where you are from does not predict your life outcomes. And that's a big issue in our area. It's big in San Antonio. It's big in our part of the country and our part of the world. And the Area Foundation is dedicating ourselves to addressing it, including in animal services. If you don't know much about community foundations, I'll give you a little background on that. A community foundation is a foundation where anybody can set up a fund, and then we will manage that fund, and we will do what you want us to do with that fund. If you say, I want the proceeds of my fund to go to a kittie's pursuit of happiness, that's what we'll do. We'll make sure that that's exactly what happens with the earnings of that fund. If you want your fund to go to scholarships, if you want it to go to a field of interest, such as animal services, we'll take the earnings of all the field of interest funds in animal services and pool them together. And then we have a grant process like we're having right now. We also have a large number of donor advised funds. And this is where the donor tells us what they want to do. They say, I want you to give $25,000 from my fund to Castroville, Nip and Tuck. And then we'll do that. We'll execute that for them. So donor advised funds are advised by people through their lifetime. They may pass it to their children, but at some point there's nobody who's a fund advisor for that fund anymore. And then it reverts to the Area Foundation based on what those donors did with that fund during their lifetime. And if most of their donations went to animal services groups, we declare that it's an animal services field of interest fund, and the earnings of that fund every year will go into animal services grant making. So that's how a community foundation works and how we work. And the money or the funds that we have available for grant making in our annual responsive process is, as you can see in this picture, a portion of the overall funds that we have. So if anybody wants to set up a fund at the San Antonio Area Foundation, or if you want, or if you know someone who wants to set up a fund, please have them contact me. Okay. And now the screen, there we go. So highlighting one of the things we look at and we ask for in our board, in our grant application is the diversity of your board. And this is something that Area Foundation decided we wanted to start asking about because we want to start shining a light on it. And from our 2019 grant processes, this is the overall kind of demography of the boards of all the different grantees that we had across all the different areas. And it's interesting. We're not trying to dictate it. We're not trying to drive it in any particular direction, but we are tracking it, and that's why we asked for it. And this slide shows that through our grant making, we've been able to devote some of our grants to the most low income or the lowest income areas of the city. And the areas that have been, I'll say, had a lack of resources for the past many decades. And we are making a lot of investments in those areas. Now, for you all, most of you all, your work is not really centered in a specific area of the city, or it might be in the city where you do your operation or the county. But this is why we ask this information, so we can understand where the funds are going and who they're helping. Now we're going to start getting into some specific grant information. I don't know why my keyboard has gotten unresponsive, because I wanted to break out of the. I'm going to stop sharing for just a minute. Everybody still here?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to go back, but I won't do a full screen so I can see the chat. The downside to this is it's not really the greatest way to look at a presentation. Okay, so where was I? We're starting to talk about the actual grant process. To be eligible for a grant with the Area Foundation, you do have to have your operation in one of the 8 counties that includes Bexar County. So I believe that includes everybody here, and doesn't require that you have your headquarters in this area, but the only thing that we want to fund is the work that you do in this area. So if there's a question about that, we can talk about that. A couple of years ago, we started to mandate to be eligible, you have to be a 501c3 for at least 1 year, and that you have to have a minimum budget of $40,000. I've got good news for anybody who has a budget of less than $40,000, because we made a slight change to that this year. But the reason we do this is because we make our grants, our grants are unrestricted. So you can use them for operating expenses. And the best practices we found around the country were that if you're going to make grants for operating expenses, it's better to go with organizations that are more established and that are big enough to be able to handle unrestricted grants that way. So that was the thinking behind it and why we do it. The application, when you get into it, I'm not going to step through the application itself, but I'll give you some sort of guidance and ideas about it. We're looking for 4 big things. One of them is community impact. And we're looking for a clear vision of your organization's role in making a difference in the community, and the role of your organization in the ecosystem of the sector. So your role in the animal services ecosystem. We ask you to summarize community needs. We ask you to describe what's unique or innovative about your work. And we ask you to tell us about the high-level results that you try to achieve with your work. And these are all important. They're part of the way we evaluate the grant application. So when you think about it and you start to work on your application and describe it, talk about the way you impact the community not just the animals that you're trying to help, but how do you help the people in the community in regards to those animals? We are interested in investment in equity. I've discussed equity already. How does your organization demonstrate a commitment to equity through your goals, actions, and progress? And we think about equity, we look at the zip codes that you serve, the demographic breakdown of the people you serve, and also the way you engage the community in your organization's decision making. So do you have people from the community on your board? Do you have advisory committees? Those kinds of things. We know that it's slightly different with animal services in that, for example, if you do transport of adoptable pets to other parts of the country, you don't know that much about the zip codes of the people who are adopting the pets. You may know more about the zip codes of where the pets came from. If you rescue pets from an animal shelter, again, you don't know where those pets came from necessarily. You know where the shelter's located. So I know it's difficult, but as much as possible, tell us in the application where you're serving, and to the extent that you know it, what's the demographics of the people that you serve. We look to the strength of organization, and here we're looking at the board and the staff. We want to see if how, as I already told you, how diverse the board is. We look at the tenure of your staff, how long your staff has been in place, been working with the organization. We look at the mission and how well your work aligns with the mission that you provided to us. And then lastly, we are interested in the financial health of the organization. We allow you to provide a budget narrative along with the financial summary. And that's where you can explain some variations from one year to the next in the financial summary. You also have the opportunity to tell us or share information you want to about your finances. You know, we are, for example, we received a large donation last year or 2 years ago, which we are using to do X. So you can, you know, just provide some insight into the financial summary. Financial health is important to the Area Foundation because we are stewards of our donors' funds, and we seek to make the best investment with the donors' funds that we can. So that's why we ask those questions. So I'm pausing for a moment. I still can't see chat, I'm sorry. So scrolling through and see if anybody is waving at me or sticks one of those little yellow hands up. Or if you want to put yourself off mute and just holler out. Okay, we're getting near the end, so we'll have time for questions. So what's new this year? Two really big things. One is we're moving into a 2-year process. So what that means is we're going to have a grant process every other year, every 2 years. So we're having a process in animal services this year. We won't have another one until 2023. And the grants will be 2-year grants. So if you are awarded a grant this year, you'll get, I'll say, the same grant next year again. I have to be a little bit cautious with that language because we don't know about fund performance and exactly if a amount of dollars is available from one year to the next, but we know it's going to be very close. So that's a pretty big deal, I think, going to the 2-year process and making 2-year grants. Things we don't fund endowments, debt reduction, scholarships, individuals, capital campaigns, unless you have a capital campaign underway and you've achieved 75% of your campaign goal. So if you're building a new building, a new shelter, something like that, that would be, you would be eligible to use these funds for that if you were at 75% of your goal or more. We don't consider purchase of vehicles, medical equipment, those kinds of things as capital kind of campaign expenses. Campaigns are really more of very large programs where you're typically building something with it. And we don't fund political activities, organizations, or lobbying efforts. It's legal for us to do that, but our board of directors decided that's something we don't want to do. Here's a chat. Okay, that was me. Okay. The other really big thing different that we started doing 2 years ago is we base the amount of the grant on your budget size. So you don't even have a place in the grant application to request a dollar amount. It's strictly based on your budget size. And we're actually looking at the budget of your 2020 budget. So your actual expenses from 2020. And if you are in these ranges, that's the size of the grant you will receive. What's new this year, and it's so new that I hadn't even changed that previous slide, and that is if your organization has a budget of less than $40,000, you are eligible for a $4,000 grant. You'll see that the grant amounts are much bigger for bigger organizations, but they're actually smaller in proportion to that organization's budget than the ones for the smaller organizations. So an organization that's at 40,000 is eligible for an $8,000 grant, which is 20% of their budget. The organization that's over $1 million, 50,000 is 5% of their budget. So it's a way that we've tried to address equity in terms of the size of organizations. The other thing we do is based on the applications that we receive, we're going to make sure that a certain amount of our money that's available for grant making will be devoted strictly to smaller organizations. So if there are organizations of $40,000 to $75,000 make up 10% of the grant applications that we receive, 10% of that total dollars that we have available will be for those size organizations. So we did want to make sure that smaller organizations are able to receive grants and that the smallest organizations aren't competing against the largest organizations for the same dollars. So the grant application process has been underway for a couple of weeks already. I was late in having the community information meeting because we couldn't get the website updated. but now it's updated and we finally had it. Here's some basic reminders for you. The deadline of the application is June 6th, which is a Sunday. So we figured you could have the weekend to work on the application if you want, because we're not going to look at it until Monday the 7th. The bad news there is if you need help with anything, there's nobody to help you on Saturday and Sunday. So if you have questions, need some help with something, you have to get the help from us by Friday afternoon, June 4th. So that's just a caution for you. With the tool that we use, you are able to print a copy of your application and review it. And you can give copies of the application to other people and let them review it. That will include the financial attachment that you add to it. So please take advantage of that tool, because you'll spot mistakes and you may print it out. You may think that you've written the best application that was ever written. Then you print it out and you hand it to someone you know, and they read it and they give you lots of pointers about it. So really highly recommend that you get somebody else to look at the application after you've been working on it. And one piece of advice is you can get somebody who's one of your critics, and they'll be happy to criticize the application for you and help you make it stronger. And there's no penalty for submitting early. You're certainly welcome to do that. For the last couple of years, if we see a mistake, we see something that needs to be clarified or fixed, we can move the application back in draft status and have you fix it. So that's my promise to you. If I see something like that you can take care of, then I'll do that. It won't be in the wording of the application. It'll be something like a mistake with the financial documents, that kind of thing. If you have a question, by all means, contact me by email or phone, and we'll work on it together. So the application's been in play. This is just a recap. The deadline is June 6th. We'll go into the application review process, which is about 8 weeks. There's a staff review, and I'm the staff, and I'll review the applications, and then I'll prepare them for a community advisory committee. And for those of you who don't know how we do this, the Area Foundation uses a group of volunteers called a community advisory committee, and they read the applications and they score them. And then we sit down together and come to a consensus decision.
Okay, there you are.
I think somebody needs to mute. Okay, thank you. Anyways, the Community Advisory Committee will help make that decision. And this year we had a grant, or I say an application process for people to be on the Community Advisory Committee. And so that's a new thing that the Area Foundation started last year, which is really opening the advisory committees to the community. And we've gotten a lot of new people onto our other advisory committees, and we're doing the same thing with the Animal Services Advisory Committee. We'll go through that process. We'll make the decision. Our target is the last week of July. And so the first week of August, we should be able to let you know yes or no, and we'll do that. There's really, I'll say the dollar amounts that I showed you on the previous slide, those are very strictly adhered to. So it's going to be this dollar amount or nothing. So we're not making partial grants in any one of these any one of these budget size ranges. All right. We've arrived at the last slide. And by the way, I'm going to have this published on our website, this presentation. And if anybody would like to have a copy of it, I'll email it to you as well. So just send me an email and I'll do that. But Catherine Garcia is our grants administrator. She's going to be the one to help you with technical problems you have with the system. And I'm the program officer, and I'm going to help you with questions that you have about the application. All right. Here's a nice long chat message. Let me see that. Does the balance sheet and statement of revenues and expenses need to be for 2020 or our most recent? Well, I would think 2020 would be the most recent. If you've already finished 2021, then 2021 would be fine. You'd have to explain to me how 2019 would be the most recently completed fiscal year. Since we became a nonprofit in January of 2020, should we write not applicable for 2019? Yes, just leave it blank. Show us your budget for the current budget year, which is 2021. Show us the actual revenues and expenses for 2020. And then 2019 is blank. And information from our LLC. No, we don't need that. No, thank you. That was from Dara. So Dara, thank you for those questions. There's a number 3, but I can't read anything there.
Oh, I'm going to ask you that question offline because I think it's a little, I don't know if it's relevant to everyone.
Okay.
Unless
That'll be
you
fine.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I know I went through the presentation in a long monologue and kind of went through fairly quickly. Didn't tell too many stories or anything. So does anyone have a question based on that or anything else? Michelle.
Hi, Gavin. It's Michelle from Primarily Primates.
Hi.
My question is, how much funding does the Animal Service Program have this multi-year phase, or at least this first year? Do you know if it's like, oh, we have $3 million or $2 million or one? I'm just curious.
I haven't actually seen that number from our finance department yet, but it's going to be roughly the same as it was last year. And last year we were able to award about 500,000.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. Now, part of that funding comes from an anonymous donor who wants that money spent on spaying and neutering. And we use that for spaying and neutering. And then we also consider feral cats and cat colony work as part of that. So that's how that works. All right. Nobody's got their yellow hand up or their regular hand.
It was a very thorough presentation, Gavin. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
This is Nikki, by the way, from National Wildlife Federation. It's nice
Oh,
to
hi,
see
Nikki.
you.
Yeah, we got to know each other on email. Just,
We did.
See you.
I feel like that's sort of how I'm getting to know lots of people, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. Well, for y'all's information, the Area Foundation is still closed after we closed last year for COVID. There's talk about it opening again in a hybrid fashion. So they want no more than 25 people in the building at a time. And somehow we're going to figure out how we're going to go into the office for maybe 2 days a week. And at the current time, many of you know that we have or let nonprofit organizations use our meeting spaces. It's not open for that yet. So hopefully health in the world will continue to improve and we'll be able to open back up in those ways sometime soon. But right now there's no date set yet. And if any of you all are users of our foundation directory, we were able to, and if you don't know about that, the Area Foundation has a subscription to a tool called Foundation Directory. We pay the subscription and you all, or nonprofits, can use it for free. Pre-COVID, because of our site license, you actually had to come into our office to use it. And but when we closed the office, we got the owners of Foundation Directory to allow us to offer it remotely, which we've done for the last year. Now they've kind of tightened the screws on it a little bit, and a nonprofit can use it remotely 1 day a month. It's a 24-hour cycle. So if you want to like work on it all night, you could do that. But when you go to our website, you send an email to our learning department and they'll set you up with the access and you can use it. But that's a tool. Foundation Directory is a tool to search for funders and funding. So it looks nationwide. You can look for funders all over and be very specific or general with your search. So I just want to point that out to you. And Alexis says it's a great resource. So thank you, Alexis. Yes, Linda.
Hi, are there going to be site visits this year with COVID?
No.
Okay.
Site visits. We discontinued site visits last year. And we, I think where we're moving to is when we make site visits, they're going to be not related to the grant application. So in other words, we just want to come visit and get to know you better, but it's not related to the grant application. And
Okay.
we actually have done that in our other impact areas. And it makes for a much more relaxed and enjoyable conversation, I think. And it's really just a way to get to know people better and understand what the needs are and so on. What we might do is, if you all are willing, is have Zoom-based site visits. So we can just have conversations that way. And in the other impact areas, we've had some of our community advisory committees be part of those meetings as well. So it's a really good learning experience. Thanks,
Thank
Linda.
you.
That would be great to do that if you guys decide to offer that. So
Okay. Thanks, Nikki. We're definitely going to do it. It's I have to kind of like round robin around the organizations to do it. But it's good. All right. Any other questions? Well, if you think of a question later, or you have a question that you think is maybe not something you want everybody to have to spend their time on, then you're very welcome to contact me by email or by phone, and we'll have that conversation later. And I appreciate you all being here. It's good to see your faces again for those who I know, and a couple of you whom I don't know. I've seen your face for the first time, so that's fun. And so have a great rest of the day, great rest of the week, and we'll see you soon, I hope.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
You.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Bye now.
Bye. Bye. Have a great day.